everyone. Thank you very much for attending. We're on to our panel section now, and then afterwards we'll be doing some Q&A from the audience. We're only running about 20 minutes late, which is usually quite remarkable. We're used to running about 4 hours late. So please grab a sandwich or a cup of coffee. This is the part that you're really going to enjoy, or at least required to hear. So the first question that I have here is, I'm not sure who will answer, so we'll just throw it out to you three guys here. What is the legal basis giving the king ownership of Canada?
Oh boy. It's first based in history, right? It's the way the feudal system works. I'm not even sure I would call it ownership. It's the result of conquest, and that conquest, as both Shawn and I alluded to, is the conquest in 1066 by William the Conqueror. That's where the feudal system begins, and the premise there is the king holds control of the territory. And basically, that has been the case ever since that moment. And so it is also the case in Canada and in other colonies. The king of the UK is also the king of Canada, and that king, whether in the name of Canada or in the name of the province, each province has a crown as well, but it's the same king. And so that's where it comes from.
Leighton, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, just, I mean, Bruce mentions feudalism. There's a reason why elites really like Marxism, because if you look at Marxism, it's actually just retreaded feudalism, right? Because if you understand what feudalism was, it's where, you know, the lowly worker would pay fealty and would work the land that's owned by the landowner, and really it was the idea that you would own nothing and you'd be happy except you were miserable, and that's kind of what where they want to take us.
And if I can frame that in, remember, ownership is control. So when you think of communism, well, nobody actually, in theory, owns the land, but the Communist Party, which controls the government, basically does own the land in that they get to decide what happens with it, and they get to decide what happens with other property. So, you know, we are in a full-blown feudalism, but that type of political myth we wouldn't put up with. If they said, well, we're entering a feudal state, so the king owns the land, and we're, you know, through the government, the king's representatives is going to sort out who gets to use it and how, we wouldn't accept that because we've been taught feudalism is bad. Well, communism is just, as Leighton so appropriately said, feudalism by another name, because if you understand ownership as who controls, you don't have to be legal title, it's who controls.
Bruce, what is the government's goal here, both federally and provincially? Maybe answer federally first. Like, what is their goal?
Well, I would put this for both levels of government in a rather than try to identify like a concrete aim that a particular government has down the road. And I'm not saying they don't have those. They may very well. I don't know how concrete the plans are. But I like to describe it in a much more abstract term, in the sense that what they actually value, what they want, is to be able to manage. Like, management is its own goal. There's a really neat passage in 1984, George Orwell. And near the end of the book, Winston Smith's been captured, is being tortured, and O'Brien comes to him and says, I know you have a question. Ask me the question. And Winston Smith says, why? Like, why are you doing this? And O'Brien says, oh, I'm sure that you have a theory about the answer. And Smith goes on something about, you know, for the greater good, and you think you're doing it for us. And O'Brien scolds him. He says, that's the falsehood that all the other regimes have told themselves through history. I will tell you the truth. And the truth is, we want power for power's sake. Power is its own answer. It's the same for this thing I'm calling management. The management means you control. You want to control for the sake of controlling. It is its own justification. The outcomes are usually terrible. If you actually look at the policies and how they work, usually they don't work. Has it deterred them? No, because that's not the point. COVID, I like to describe as the pinnacle achievement of the managerial state. That's not because the policies worked. They didn't work. They were terrible. But the managerial state, for the first time, managed to control everything, subordinated everybody else's interests and desires to their own mandates. And that was the triumphant moment.
Leighton, what's the government's goal?
Well, as I said earlier, I agree with Bruce, but I think if you look at the federal government, as I said, Mr. Carney's telling us what the goal is. He's talking about he wants Canada to be part of a new world order, and the new world order looks to me like the surrender of national sovereignty, which is another way of saying surrender of individual freedom. He wants us to lower our expectations, and that he sees us as being part of a group of post-nation states called the EU. But on some level, that seems to be what the goal is, but I think the deeper goal is what Bruce is talking about, and that is the consolidation of wealth and power in a few people's hands. That is the dream of totalitarians throughout history. So I think that's what's happening federally. Provincially, honestly, I could say a lot of really good things about Danielle Smith. I could say a few good things about her government, but I could not, if I was going to try to say in one sentence or try to describe what her government has been over the last 4 years, I couldn't tell you. And I think that's a big problem for her, and it's even a worse problem for Alberta. I don't really know how to interpret what is happening provincially, because so much of what we're getting from the provincial government, at least in Alberta, I see as schizophrenic. It's hard to make sense of what they're doing, because on the one hand they talk about they want to drill, they want to create an energy policy, and the next moment they're involved in carbon capture and net zero programs. That's an example. So for me, when I see that, it's hard to figure out exactly, and that may be the point. That may be what the reason why you don't see a coherent structure to her government. It's just sort of like, remember, oil of Olay, keep them guessing.
I would just encourage everyone to, when we're done with this taping, and you'll find it online, wouldn't that be wonderful if we just forwarded on links to perhaps our provincial representatives? Because they were asked to attend, as well as the municipal level as well. So, Mr. Buckley, can any of this be fixed by taking cases to court?
Can I jump on the
Sure.
last question?
Let's go
though?
back to the last one.
Because, Leighton was talking about issues with the provincial government. And, this seems to be an issue as, I think you have to measure a government as, are they taking control away from you over significant parts of your life, or are they giving you control back? And, one thing I haven't seen much talk about is they passed provincial government passed a law that would basically prevent you from suing if you're in a car accident. Well, let's think about that from a legal philosophical perspective for a moment. So here we're in this Westminster system, and one of the few gems of that system is that people had the right, if somebody else injured them, to be able to seek redress in the King's courts for that wrong. Now, the two areas where you are most likely to be injured or harmed by somebody and need the court's redress is you're most likely to be injured at work, and they've taken that away with workers' compensation. And now they're taking away, and the second most likely place where you would need to seek redress from injury from somebody else in the King's Court is a car accident, and now they're taking that away. Now, you see, if the state wants to say, well, here's an optional program, so you don't have to go to court if you want. Here's another one. Fine. But we lose the right to take personal responsibility, and now we're in a full-blown communist state. I don't have a choice if I'm injured at work. I'm in this socialist system called workers' compensation, which most people have an awful experience with. You know, in BC, my firm used to take personal injury files, and, you know, you would ask, did this happen at work? And it's like, if it did, it's like, oh, is there any way, like maybe you're driving to work, is there any way we can get you out of that box? Because you were way better off being out of the government box and in the courts being able to seek redress. But here we've workers' compensation, now we've lost it. And so what other areas? We're going to find every area the government taking away our ability to seek redress in the courts. It's all going to be managed and not for our benefit. And that's a fundamental right. And, you know, here we've got this, you know, let's protect animals and allow the state onto your property. You know what, it used to be you weren't worried about people coming to your door. Like people in this room right now have been harassed over this census. They've just been relentless. We were, you know, yesterday I was getting in my car to pick Bruce up at the airport, and I saw a census guy across the street banging on the door.
We're not making any personal comment regarding ourselves in that.
Right, yeah, okay. So.
Just saying.
But, you know, we're losing the right. Going to court, no, I think it's an absolute waste. I think the courts, you know, the court system is absolutely broken, and the first part of it being broken is that the government gets to pick the government. So the federal government gets to pick all Superior Court judges, and that's the level of court that matters. So just use Constitution for an example. You give me the power to appoint judges, and in 50 years, our constitutional problem is solved. Well, why is that? Because I will only select judges that are going to rule the way I think it should be. And you should never give anyone like me or the government that power. So I don't think the courts are going to solve our problems.
Leighton, do you think the courts are going to solve our problems?
No, I don't think that we can expect. And Bruce put this really well when he said, you know, ultimately, who do we have to blame? You know, it's a matter of taking civic responsibility. Although I would say I would disagree slightly with what Shawn said, in that we still have courts, right? And so obviously my opinion is biased since this is my profession and what I do. But I mean, I still think that even though we don't like what's happening with our courts, we don't like a lot of the decisions, I think we still have to keep trying to work, to use the systems that exist, because one of the ways that you can change things is from within. And, you know, yes, we had a lot of bad decisions, but every once in a while we get a pretty good one. You know, like what happened with the Freedom Convoy decision, which was quite unexpected. And so we have to keep trying. I mean, I have a class action that's going to be in court next month in Edmonton, the federal court, on behalf of unvaccinated Canadians. It's a class action. And we're going to be there applying for a certification. You can guess what the Government of Canada's attitude is towards our case. But, you know, I believe that we have to keep trying, because if it is true that all hope is lost in our courts, the way that we're going to sound that out is by bringing cases before the courts. But I think we have to be careful also to paint all judges with the same brush, because I know people who are on the judiciary, and I know there's a lot of good people populating those courts. And we shouldn't, you know, rule out the possibility that, you know, we're going to get some really good decisions that are going to help. And if you look historically, courts go through different periods where they tend to be very focused and very strict in a certain area, and then they'll change that stance. So I still think that while we have the courts and while we have access, we still have to keep trying to make change there. That's my opinion.
Can I put it very briefly? I would put it this way. I agree that there are going to be particular situations in which you can go to a court and maybe get a remedy, because the circumstances are such that it produces that possibility. And that might be a remedy for those people but you're not going to solve the systemic constitutional governance problem by going to the courts. Because the courts, as I alluded to earlier, the courts are, in the broad abstract sense, on the same page, more or less, as the government and the legislatures. They're not going to disrupt the system. As Leighton says, I agree, there are good judges out there who will apply the law as it exists. The federal court decision about the Emergencies Act is a very good example. That's a great couple of decisions. Very sound, very well done. But going to court is not going to solve the bigger problem.
And I would just also add, we have to understand that judges live in our culture. So, we just had this COVID experience, and, you could almost describe it as a mass hysteria experience. And, history documents time and time again where a whole population believes, or a group of people believe things that aren't necessarily true. For example, I was reading again the book, The Crowd by Gustave Le Bon, published in 1895. And he's describing how a whole collective can believe and actually see something. And one of the examples he gives is there was this French cruiser that in a storm got separated from its sister cruiser and is looking for it. And then they actually see a whole bunch of rafts with men on them and waving for them and calling for, and every person on the ship saw these sailors in distress, but when they get there, there's just branches in the water. And it was written about, it was documented, like a large crew. Everyone saw the same thing, and there's this mass contagion. Well, with COVID, the judges experienced the same fear. They experienced the pressure, and many of them would have absolutely believed. But as the culture changes, and we're responsible for changing the culture, as the culture changes, the decisions from the court on an issue changes.
A question about 3030. Can you speak to the oil sands? How would that be impacted by 3030? Any thoughts? This was just handed to me.
I don't know.
So there's your answer. We try. How are they getting off the family farm? How are they getting us off the family farm? And I really want to know, who are they? Because people say, oh, they, right? And who are they, and how are they getting us off the family farm? Bruce? Oh, Shawn. Yeah, Shawn.
So, and I'm very disappointed in the province of Alberta over this, because here, if we talk about our Constitution, so the British statute, that British North America Act of 1867 gives provinces jurisdiction over property and civil rights. So the province should be handling, what's happening with the family farm. But the trick that the federal, and this is all gamed out a long time ago. So about 25 years ago, the federal government made a decision, we're going to get rid of the small abattoirs and consolidate into big meat packing plants. And this was a step for today. So, and it's not that it was safer. I remember getting calls from small abattoirs, and most of them were being managed by people that had gotten, master's degree and PhDs in Europe, where they have that for running things like abattoirs. It had nothing to do with safety. It had to do with consolidation. Well, the federal government knew that they had a problem. They already knew that they would be reframing our interaction with animals as a pandemic risk. So now what they did is they passed the Safe Food for Canadians Act and then regulations, the Safe Food for Canadian regulations, which, admits, well, we don't have jurisdiction over farming in a province, but we have jurisdiction over trade that crosses a provincial border or a national border. So if any agricultural product is going to cross a border, it is now subject to these Safe Food for Canadian federal regulations. Well, we've consolidated our meat packers. So if you sell a cow to a meat packer, you can't say that a piece of hamburger isn't going to cross a border, and same with dairy. So we've consolidated, so now the federal government has jurisdiction and is imposing these strict regulations that are reframing our interactions with animals as a pandemic risk, but provinces like Alberta are playing along. and doing their provincial part. And so you see, I see the provinces on every issue. The provinces should be standing up and saying, no, you are encroaching onto our jurisdiction, and you've created the framework so that you've got jurisdiction when really you don't. They're doubling down and playing along. It's going to be provincial inspectors coming onto your farm and enforcing these regulations. It's, provincial inspectors that won't need a warrant and can just come to see. So you'll no longer have the right to sit down and eat, barbecue outside and not have state inspectors show up. You won't be able to tell them to leave. They can just insist you drop everything and assist them in assessing your farm. And it's just the beginning. So,
yeah. So you can ask this question about all of these issues. Who is they? And my answer usually is, it doesn't matter who they is. Because if you managed to identify somebody in particular and rooted them out, you would still get the same thing. Because more people would replace them. It's more a function of a set of ideas. And there is a class of people in bureaucracies, in governments, in farmer companies, in professional regulators, who all believe in the premises upon which the system is based. It's same thing happened during COVID. COVID was not orchestrated by some small room of a small group of people pulling strings and issuing memos. Everybody understood what they were supposed to do, and they all did it in various jurisdictions: federal government, provincial government, municipalities, public health authorities. Everybody understood what the ideas were. They bought into them. They thought they were doing good. Most people who are on these agendas think they're doing the right thing in the public interest. The problem, again, is the belief in expertise to frame the public interest in a way that overrides individual interests. If you have that, you've got a problem, and it does not matter who they is.
I just sort of add on to what Bruce just said. What they agree on is a strategy that I called, in a commentary I wrote for my show, called rationed abundance. So in Alberta, we're sitting on really an embarrassment of riches in terms of we know that we have abundant water, abundant land, abundant energy, mining, all these things. But these people are telling us that we have to ration. It's a psyop, because if they convince us that there's scarcity, then of course that impacts our personal freedom, that impacts the amount that we can produce. But what it produces are some really awful things, like a scarcity of food, a scarcity of energy. It produces poverty, starvation, and in some cases, death. If you look at the history of the Soviet Union or communist China, Maoist China, what happens when you start rationing abundance sort of in that way. And one of the key distinctions between capitalism and Marxism or socialism is that capitalism is a philosophy of abundance. If we work hard and if we use resources wisely, we can create more and more and more, and that works to the benefit of all. Marxism is a philosophy of envy and scarcity that says, you're rich, you worked hard, but you don't own that stuff. In fact, it's awful, you awful capitalist, and we have to take that away from you. And the state, as Bruce says, comes in and redistributes all of that, mostly to themselves.
We'll be asking, I'll be coming down into the audience in just a few moments, and I'll be asking if you have any particular questions. My next question that I want to hear, because I'm a mom and a grandma, I have 11 grandchildren.
Bravo.
Thank you. That's pretty good, eh? What direction, and I'll let you decide who wants to answer this first. What direction would you give to our younger Canadians? What direction?
You want me to answer this? So I don't think that younger Canadians are getting a fair shake. And they deserve one. And so there's only two choices. Either we and they together fix this, or they should get out. They should go someplace that will, if they can find a place that's stable and will give them fair opportunity based upon their own merit, then they better go, because that is not happening right now in this country.
We were in an event in Grimsby, Ontario, and that question was asked, and Bruce said the same thing, except I think not the first part, just they should leave. And a lot of people got upset. Some people actually got up and left. But it's true, isn't it? Could you imagine, like you're a 20-year-old, so you got the whole life ahead of you. Well, okay, the federal government is about to overlay, no, please don't bring questions up. Teresa's going to come down, and it's because you're coming up in front of the camera. So you're like 20 years old. Well, you want to buy a house, or you want to buy, a farm. You want to make it work, but the government is in the process of basically making it so that you can't own anything, and basically over-regulating. This administrative state is completely out of control. How are you going to make it? Like it's funny. Like, we've segued in the NHPPA into these property issues, and it's a little off topic for us, but nobody else was doing it. And it came about because we were invited by the Ontario landowners to go speak, and we were invited by, the Elk Commission to come and speak. And so it's like, okay, I better get to know these issues. Well, I have to tell you, we were so alarmed that we were having I shouldn't use past tense, the discussion, should we leave Canada? Because what if in Alberta, we turn on the radio and learn that morning that now there's Aboriginal title because of a treaty under UNDRIP over our property. Now, do I have any equity where I could buy a place somewhere else? Like, have I lost my ability to have any self-determination? Because that's what happens under a communist state. That's what happens when they take your property away. I wouldn't, as a young person, willingly put myself in that position.
And I should just add, as many of you may know, that in Canada, unlike in the US, institutionalized discrimination against white boys is fully constitutional, fully legal. You can tell that just by looking, for example, at the job opening listings at universities, which are designated for particular groups. Only if you are a member of that group are you eligible to apply for the jobs. That people have an incorrect assumption that must be illegal. In the U.S., I think it probably is because of recent decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court. In Canada, it is not, both under the Constitution, Section 15(2), and under provincial human rights codes. That kind of discrimination is perfectly okay.
My answer was going to show my conservative roots. That is, I would tell young people to read old books. And why do I say that? Because our old books contain wisdom, and they also are a repository of the values that have been transmitted from our forebears into now. And now I'm not saying I want to go back to, the Victorian era or even the 1950s. That's not what I'm talking about. But the concept of conservatism is that we have a vision, a concept of what is beautiful, and we carry that forward, those things that are beautiful, that are worth keeping, and we transmit them forward through our children, through our grandchildren, because those values do withstand the test of time. The world changes. I mean, we've got tremendous technological changes with AI and everything else, but those values are transcendent, and they can be carried forward. And if we're any nation, as I said earlier, you got to have land, you got to have a people, and you have to have a set of shared values. If you don't have all that, you really don't have a country. And all those things are under attack right now. So if our young people, what I would say to them is learn more about the real history of Canada. Pick up a book written by Pierre Berton, for example, right? We have a really great history in our country. We have a lot to be proud of. There's few countries I can think of that have less to apologize for and more to be proud of than Canada. And unfortunately, our young people just haven't been told the real truth about our country.
This is a curious question. Would Alberta independence solve our property problems? Just curious.
It depends. It depends a lot on what was created afterwards. I mean, the answer might be yes, if you got a different kind of constitution, different kind of government, different kind of set of values. But if all Alberta does is get rid of Ottawa, then the answer is no. Keep in mind that most property intrusions, not all of them by any means, but most of them come through the provincial government or delegations of authority from the provincial government. Property is an area of provincial jurisdiction. So, except in those areas that Shawn was referring to where the federal government is interfering, and they do, no doubt about it, but nevertheless, the province has the power in many of these situations to say, no, thank you, please stay away. Your Alberta government is not doing that any more than any other provincial government. So if things don't change on that basis, then the answer is no.
Yeah, it's important to remember, if you study history, most independence movements fail. They either don't make it, or a country becomes independent and it's worse than it was under the previous government. I mean, just look, continental Africa, for example. I mean, you can make a really strong argument to say that a lot of those places were better governed when they were under imperial governance from European powers than they are now. Some of the worst human rights offenders, some of the poorest countries in the world, where they have the most abusive totalitarian governments, are in countries where independence was achieved, but it didn't do anything good for the people, as Bruce says. So I think Bruce is absolutely right. If Alberta independence is just going to give us a different government, if we're just sort of changing the color of the coat that we're putting on our government, then it's really a futile exercise. What really has to happen is meaningful change. We have to make significant changes, corrections in the structure of government, where our values are different. We have to be focused on things like freedom and prosperity, individual responsibility, human flourishing. Those are the things that we need. And of course, all of that is mostly achieved by having smaller government. What we have in Canada right now is a hyperabundance of government. We've become accustomed to it. We think that's our natural state of things. But actually, historically, that is the worst possible situation for any society that values freedom and prosperity and human flourishing.
Yeah, and I think, at the base of it, we've got a spiritual problem happening. And I agree completely with what Bruce and Leighton have said. There's already been talk about, a Republic of Alberta or adopt a Westminster system. And then we're just back to where we are, because there's a couple of problems. First of all, the people that want to exercise power are the wrong personality types. So the people that would be attracted to a system where power is vested are not the people we want to have power. And, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And what's being touted about is still absolute power. So, Bruce is talking, will power move from the king to the legislature, to the courts, to the administrative state? It might be better for a short period of time, but it's the system itself that is the problem. I couldn't agree with Bruce more. So first of all, I'm volunteering on behalf of either the province of Alberta or the country of Canada, this panel of 3 lawyers, to draft the next constitution. I
think Bruce already did it.
Yeah, because I can't. Oh yeah, no, Bruce Pardy. So on his Substack, he's already been talking about how we have to reverse the power structure. So instead of the state having all the power and granting exemptions, which we call rights, the power has to be vested in the citizen with exemptions granted to the state. So, I think we'd be long on our way. But I'd also point out is the most freest nations in recorded history have been those that have been based on the Christian traditions. So, where we fear God, and where, our laws were based on treat your neighbor like yourself. I mean, literally, Lord Denning, who is my neighbor? Like literally, if we fear God and if we understand that we have a responsibility to treat others like we would treat ourselves, then we end up so I think I agree with Bruce and Leighton. We have to vest power in the citizen, but I think also we have to understand that government just devoid of any moral compass is it's an interesting place. And I know Bruce is going to say yes, but we can't dictate what people believe. So, we'll have an interesting discussion when the three of us sit down to draft the Constitution.
Any rebuttal to that, Bruce, or are we going to the?
No, let's rumble.
So my final question, and then I'll go into the audience and take your questions. So this is what is actually a question that came to my heart. Speaking about history books, in 100 years, what will the history books write about the actions that the people, and that's you guys, in 100 years, what will the history books write about the actions that the people took in the summer of 2026?
I think it depends upon what the history books are allowed to write in 100 years. I mean, that very much depends upon how things go, right? If things go badly, you will get an official version of things in 100 years, and you won't have any clue what actually happened.
But I assure you, the official version will glorify what happened. But I think what Teresa means by the question is truthfully what would happen. And, we're in an inflection point. And I am so excited and optimistic because, what happens is we're in an information war. We are in an information war, and we're in a war with the administrative state. Bruce said COVID they actually managed to get control over everything for a short period of time. But everyone was surprised. Most of us didn't understand we were in an administrative state. Most of us didn't understand that we're in an information war with those that want pan-nationalism, which is a taxation without representation in its full force, where basically all of our important policies are being dictated by people that we don't elect and aren't accountable to us in any way. Well, we didn't know this. And, in most wars, when the attack happens, you're rolled over. My favorite, and it takes you a while to hold the line. Like when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, they'd be going hundreds of miles a day. My favorite is in the Korean War, no word of a lie, the US and South Korean soldiers, at one point, they could look over their shoulder and go, that's the ocean. They literally had been pushed almost to the very end, and then they held the line and they started pushing back. I think that's where we are. Once they pulled the COVID trigger, they had to go for broke. I knew that. Okay, you pulled that trigger, you now have to go for broke, where you institute the full control grid. And the question is, are they going to get there? And I don't think they are, because it now has to accelerate. And so we're seeing it on every angle. And I believe what's going to happen is people are, it's like the emperor has no clothes moment. What? Really? Just wait, you're going to institutionalize racist property ownership in Canada? No, that's not going to work. So even if they brought it in, we're going to go, no, we can't live this way. And so I think that, that vision that's been for Canada, for us to be a nation of refuge and a land of freedom, is going to be brought about. So I'm optimistic.
Amen. In terms of writing history, if you're familiar with someone named Yuval Harari, he's a cretin of a man, but you should read his book. It's called Homo Deus. And his vision is that we won't be writing history because we'll have an AI that knows all, sees all, and controls all, and it will be writing all of our history for us. And, then there's people like Ray Kurzweil, who's developing all the AI technology for Google. And that's essentially what they want to do, is they want to create a God, they want to make a God of AI that's going to run everything the way that they like it. But in terms of writing history, Churchill said something along the lines of to the victor go the spoils. That is, if you win, you get to write history. And so essentially, we have to win.
First, my personal pledge, gentlemen, I do believe that Alberta will prevail, and when it does, I will be leading the charge to have statues made of you three and to have school children sing songs in your honor, all right? So, and Teresa, of course. I'm so sorry. All right, here's the question. I do love talking to forever Canadians. Is it fair and reasonable of me to explain that there has never, ever been a check and balance in the Westminster system other than the honor of gentlemen? So if Leighton and I were in the House of Lords and we were both titled men and we had land or something, there would be social consequence if we did not act with honor. And I believe today that that concept has been completely lost, and they've figured out that the system allows them to work with zero honor, so it's not worth protecting. Is that fair? That was the only check and balance.
Well, first of all, I like the sound of Lord Grey. I think if that happened, I would probably donate a cup or something. But no, you raise a great point. I think we have to have conversations with people. This is one of the things that we're losing, is the ability to have discourse. And they're actually trying to legislate out our ability to have, and I don't think you can have a meaningful conversation with somebody unless you can risk offending them, or at least offending one of their ideas. But it is possible to be hard on a problem and not hard on the person you're talking to. We've kind of lost the sense of how to do that. So I think the more that we can do that microcosmically in our own circles, really that's how you really disseminate free speech. That's really what free speech is. You don't have to necessarily agree with somebody else. Bruce and I don't agree on everything. We agree on a lot of things, but we can have a civil conversation where it doesn't turn into ad hominem attacks. So I think I would encourage people to have conversations with their neighbors. And it might be you might say something like, well, you should support Alberta independence because it might very well be the only salvation and path forward for Canada. That could be the actual path. I know my good friend Grant Abraham, that's what he thinks. That's why he supports Alberta independence. He thinks it could be the salvation for our nation. That we're going to set an example for the rest to follow. So, I mean, have those kinds of conversations. Conversations of persuasion, is what I'm saying.
And to your honor question, I think the answer is yes. So the rule of law as a concept relies upon the honorable self-restraint of people with power. It's not really a judicially enforceable idea. You are relying upon politicians and bureaucrats and judges to restrain themselves to the areas that they're supposed to have control within. And when you get to the place we're at now, where that kind of honor has been discarded, the people in power don't believe in the rule of law anymore because it gets in the way of their managerial mandate. So it's been just tossed aside. They would never admit to that, but the honor of self-restraint is gone. And so we are now in not a rule of law, but rule by law kind of situation.
I think also your question raises a problem with the Westminster system trying to be replicated in Canada, because the reality is in the United Kingdom, starting a clear point was the Magna Carta, where the king was forced to concede vis-a-vis the nobility that there would be rule of law between those two. And, the House of Lords there was landowners, and in many ways it acted as a sober second a kind of a check on the House of Commons. Well, they imposed that on us. The Senate was meant to be kind of equivalent to the House of Lords, which is why in our Constitution there's a land ownership requirement. You had to actually own land of a certain value to be eligible for the Senate. But the problem is the Prime Minister gets to appoint who is in the Senate, and we've evolved to the place where senators, it's a party system in the Senate. So Liberal senators vote according to the Liberal Party in the House of Commons, and Conservative senators vote according to, Conservative in the House of Commons. So it's not a body of second sober thought. It's become a party system. So, aside from the fact that the Westminster system is awful and, the power structure is the opposite, I so agree with what Bruce says, but it just so doesn't work in Canada that, really it's an expense with no meaning. It was meant to operate kind of like the House of Lords, but it's become a party system. So if we were to retain the Senate, I so agree with let's elect senators and we can't have a party system, but I think the whole system's broken. And can I just say there's something, I don't know why I thought of it, but I just wanted to strengthen, what I think Bruce had raised the issue about, this referendum, right? So there'll be people watching from other parts of the country that won't understand the problem that's been illustrated in Alberta. So in Alberta, there is a piece of legislation that says that if 10% of the an amount equal to 10% of the population that voted in the last provincial election, signs, and it's documented, a referendum question, that the province has to have the referendum. And so on the issue of separation, I think one of the gentlemen indicated there was 700,000 signatures, well above that 10% threshold. I mean, we have 4 million people in Alberta, so 700,000 signing a petition saying we want a referendum on something is a significant hurdle. And also, it was tough to get that because, somebody shows up with a driver's license and they're rural and they have a box number. That wasn't enough. You had to verify their address. So, it was onerous to get to that threshold. And then what happened is some, and again, we're maybe talking about 3% of the population. The Indigenous bands, they go to court seeking an injunction. We basically had the court saying that, well, even holding the question will violate Section 35 of our Constitution Act of 1982. Well, this is a constitutional crisis because, so do you mean a province like Quebec or a province like Alberta has no self-determination? You could literally have 95% of the population saying we want to go in this direction, and 5% has a permanent veto on self-determination. I call that a constitutional crisis, even within the terms that Bruce said, where it's acting within the Constitution, because we have no self-determination is basically what the court said, is we have a permanent veto if a certain percent, and if within this constitutional structure and the federal government is actively promoting we're going to give permanent, based on race, to 5% of the population these special property rights as we march towards communism, and nobody can actually own property, including Aboriginals, because their rights collective, not individual. Well, why would you give that up? Why wouldn't you say, no, I want to live in a country with these special rights? But it's a crisis of self-determination. So we find ourselves in a world where people within a province have no right to decide whether they want to remain in a nation or not. That's just interesting to know. Whether you agree with that or not, at least we know that's the case.
Well, the other issue that you should keep in mind in terms of the referendum is that the referendum is not an end in itself, because of what Bruce said about where the power is. We really can't have any confidence that Danielle Smith and her government or Mr. Carney's government will do anything with that referendum result. Remember, we had a referendum 5 years ago in this province on equalization, which was sort of a referendum on independence, if you think about it, and 62% of Albertans voted in favor of it. And so far, Mr. Kenney and Danielle Smith have done absolutely nothing with that. So it's entirely conceivable we would get a referendum where 62% of Albertans vote in favor of independence, but that doesn't result in independence.
And let me just add, in case anybody's not aware, that in December, in Bill 14, the last section of that act amended the Referendum Act to say the following thing. If the government holds a constitutional referendum, which is what this is, that is otherwise binding, then, and I'm going to paraphrase here just not to get into the legalese, but if it is an independence referendum, then that referendum, which is otherwise binding, the government is not obliged to carry out. That's section 4.3 of the Referendum Act, I think.
And in some provinces, like let's use Saskatchewan as an example, they don't even have this referendum act. So I mean, the province is free because they can do whatever they want. They could even repeal that act, so we don't, in Alberta, Albertans wouldn't even have the opportunity to bring the referendum, which is just interesting. So how do you have self-determination? How does, a large movement of people in any province that want to leave Canada for whatever reasons, get down that road? Like, we're learning we really don't have self-determination. And if you had an Alberta government that did push for it and said we are going to, is the federal government going to bring in UN troops to then enforce the UN treaties like UNDRIP and use Section 35 of the Constitution to say you can't separate? You see how we're in a constitutional crisis. So basically they're saying, no, we get to impose Aboriginal title on you because we are in this constitutional box. It's very interesting. And I say no. We just say no. We just say it's 2026. There's 40 million of us. We're not going to have a racist country. We're not going to put up with becoming a communist country. We are going to have a free and prosperous nation. We should be the most free. We should be so prosperous it's crazy. And we're tired of being beaten down.
We have a question on One Health.
Hi, my name is Darcy. Thank you. First of all, thank you for taking the time out of your day to come and do this presentation. It's fantastic. You and your team. Thank you. My question is, and Shawn, you kind of tipped us off that the One Health policies that are hugely onerous on me as a farmer. I see the trap being set over the many years of legislation and rules. How do we stand up against this type of thing?
So I love that question because I said earlier, we're with the Natural Health Product Protection Association, and our mandate is to protect health rights and, with particular emphasis on access to natural health products, which really, we're on the outer edge of that, except that we need the first part of natural health is nutrition. And that is food that's healthy. And I don't want to eat corporate farm food where the feed and everything is dictated and when they're vaccinated up the yin-yang because we're getting put into this control box. I want to eat from animals that aren't registered with the federal government and the provincial government. I mean, that's just what I want. I want raw milk from cows that aren't vaccinated. But it's illegal. It's illegal for me to have that in Canada. Actually, the government has taken, because the flip side is we're losing the right to have meat that isn't, totally drugged and unvaccinated as the government takes this control. And it's just the first round. This is called rent seeking. This is what economists call it. So always for our safety, in different areas, the government basically imposes ever stricter regulations, and they push the small guy out. And they start imposing fees on the survivors to pay for the government bureaucracy, and the government loves it because they get another bureaucracy, and the industry loves it because it creates a quasi-monopoly. So we already have that in our abattoirs, our big meat packing plants. We have quasi-monopolies because the government got rid of the competition. And we're the animal rights activists. I mean, it still breaks my heart. My wife and I are in Valemount some years ago. It's like 40 below. It's like 40 below. I'm leaving the car running to gas up the car, and there is a trailer load of pigs likely going to Vancouver, probably from Alberta. And those pigs are crying because they're freezing to death. They are crying, and for sure many of them died on the trip. And how in God's name can we be treating animals that way so that we've got consolidated? Like we haven't even talked about animal welfare, right? So how do we, so we're holding these events, and we're in Onoway to try to get farmers, rural people, because if the first step one is letting people know that they're losing their ownership through this. So, but we've got to create an army. So we need this shared with everyone. Like, we're a public face, but we don't have the time to, like, this is going to be posted on the nhppa.org site. We don't have time to be sending it out to your network, and we don't know your network. And, though your network, you could be saying, like, listen, you're a farmer, you got to share this with other farmers. Like, it's only if you tell others to tell others that this is going to happen. Well, what do you mean, what can you do?
He's just asking, what can we do?
Well, so here's the thing is, like, we're watchmen up here, and our job is to stand on the tower and tell you the danger's coming. So I think, honestly, I'm telling everyone, you watch the movie Gandhi, I think we need peaceful civil disobedience in large numbers, and that's going to be the farmers organizing, that's going to be other groups organizing, but your children are going to be in a communist state, and your grandchildren may not exist, because communist states always lead to mass death. So we're at an inflection point, and I would say, all Christians, you get on your knees now, and you repent and you get back to God, because it's a promise, it's not a may. If his people will get on their knees and pray, that he'll heal their land. And I think we're all going to be shocked, but we've got something to go through first. I mean, shocked for the good. But we've got something to go through first. And so first is feeling that I feel urgency in your, what can I do? But my gosh, I hardly hear anyone saying, what can we do? Meaning, I want to do something, tell me what to do. I don't know what that answer is, but your passion is already the answer, and we need to infect it in others, and then collectively figure out what to do. But it's paying the price through civil disobedience.
Thank you.
Peaceful.
So,
we get nowhere unless it's peaceful. And that's why I'm saying watch Gandhi.
Watch Gandhi.
You get nowhere unless it's peaceful.
Right, farmers on tractors in Holland, for example.
Watch Gandhi. That really, watch Gandhi. That's your homework for this weekend. We have a question regarding the CFIA and our friends there.
My name is Merv Johnson, and my question is kind of two questions, I guess. With the sign of power that the government CFIA has shown with the killing of the ostriches and the killing of the elks here in Alberta, right here close to Edmonton, first of all, the media is trying not to let too many people hear about it. And if anybody tries to go against it, they're, being penalized. And the question is okay, so are we so scared to not stand up for our rights because we're going to bring, the government to look at us as, we have to penalize that person to keep him quiet, And there's also the other rumor that the government has bought a bunch of land for bulk or cull of animals where they're going to kill a whole bunch. And I'm just wondering if there's any truth to that.
So, Health of Animals Act and Canadian Food Inspection Agency, I mean, it's part of the problem is they've taken control of our food supply. So, You know, the ostriches, one thing that was encouraging, and even you asking that question, is a lot of people do know, and internationally they know, because people were watching and people were standing up. You know, there was another story before the ostriches. So in Ontario, there was a rancher named Montana Jones who had the largest flock of rare Shropshire sheep in Canada. And under their, scrapie program, it's a bit of a long story, but she became a scapegoat where the Canadian Food Inspection Agency wanted to slaughter her herd under the scrapie program so that they could dead test them. Now, they had live tested them, and these sheep did not test positive for scrapie. And if you live test, every couple of months over maybe a year and a half, that's as robust as dead testing. And she said, and Rare Breeds Canada said, and Rare Breeds International said, if you slaughter this flock, this type of sheep is going to become extinct in the world. So just quarantine them and keep live testing them until you're satisfied. But let's preserve this line of sheep. And the CFAIA said no. They said, we're coming on this date to load your sleep and slaughter them. And a bunch of farmers were upset. And they're at a meeting in Ontario, and they're saying, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. And then a farmer named Michael Schmidt stood up and said, what do you mean there's nothing you can do? We can do whatever we want to do, regardless of the cost. And they decided, they formed the Farmers Peace Corps. And the night before the Canadian Food Inspection Agency showed up, they sheep-napped the sheep. And thank goodness it wasn't goats, because kidnapping is very serious in Canada. And I don't know, it was 6 or 8 months. They had, for a while they had helicopters all over the place. And they couldn't find the sheep. And then finally they found the sheep. And they slaughtered them, and they didn't have scrapie, and now they're going to become extinct. But if every time the Canadian Food Inspection Agency got involved, the farmer said, regardless of the cost, because they could only name 3 of them, right? Like one snitched on the other 3. Oh, you're not getting charged because you snitched. And the other 3 stood up in court to face charges. Now, eventually the charges got dropped because it took them too long. But they were willing to go to jail if necessary to say, we're not putting up with this anymore. And that's peaceful civil disobedience. That's not violence. That's farmers standing up. And most of them didn't get named, right? But those that did were willing, and they're proud to this day. It was onerous. I was counsel for 2 of them. I mean, we were probably in court, if you added it up, for 3 months fighting this. And but that's what it's going to take. It's going to take the Farmers Peace Corps every single time the Canadian Food Inspection Agency wants to slaughter animals. We have to start saying no. We have to make it difficult peacefully so that because they don't like the pushback, and we have to let the world know. Because you're never going to get, elk, you're never going to get rid of chronic wasting disease because it's in the wild. And we don't even know, in their programs, they can't measure that it makes any difference. We just have to start saying, no, you don't have control. It's got to be peace back, and on every front.
And final question.
So I grew up in Alberta, just in Barrhead. Spent about 20 years in Toronto, moved back once, actually when Trudeau was voted in. So I'm just wondering, so when we had the convoy, it was amazing because the West didn't know how the East felt and vice versa. But all of a sudden, it seemed like every Canadian woke up and found out, oh my gosh, we're all on the same side, right? So I'm just kind of wondering, do you believe, first, the Alto project, could that be an eye-opener for Ontarians so that they start to understand what Alberta is going through? And because I understand, and maybe I'm wrong, but that they've passed legislation to start expropriating land from Ontario farmers?
And just so people understand, Alto, so it's a mass transportation project where they're expecting to take huge tracts of land, just because many people won't understand what Alto is.
Right, and it's a boondoggle to boot. it will involve taking a lot of farmland to build this high-speed rail, or at least that's the claim. I think the convoy was very important in so many ways. But there's also a danger that we live inside our bubbles. A lot of people east and west, because of the convoy, made connection like you're describing. But it wasn't all Canadians by any means. And the vast majority, I'm just guessing now, but I would suspect the vast majority of Ontarians on that issue would have been unmoved. And many of them were actually very much opposed to the convoy. And although the mainstream legacy media is now featuring some stories about Alberta independence, I don't think that it has hit the. I don't think it has registered in the mainstream consciousness of Ontarians in their daily lives yet. It's not a pressing issue on the political agenda there. I wouldn't read too much into any of that. For now, Albertans, I think, are on their own.
And David has one question from the chat. He's going to wrap her up here with the final question.
Yeah, this question's been paraphrased from our many online chatters. If you were given the opportunity, what sort of state would you create and what sort of framework would you put into place to avoid these problems infecting our current system?
That is a great question. I love that question. I've written a constitution for an independent Alberta. If you want to have a look at it, it's published in the C2C journal. It goes like this. The constitution that we have and the other ones that we're aware of are based upon a premise. And the premise is this, that the state is all powerful. It has unlimited subject matter jurisdiction. And again, when I say the state, I mean all the bits. Provinces and feds, bureaucracies, legislatures, and courts. All powerful. And then what we do in the Canadian Charter is we say, all powerful except. And the exceptions, or at least the claimed exceptions, are, for example, our charter rights. Yeah? You can do anything you want. If you're a legislature, you can legislate anything you want. You can legislate property away. You can take people's livelihoods away, except, and here are the charter rights. And then we give the courts the job of interpreting and applying those charter rights. Now, what I'm suggesting as an alternative is to flip that default. You reverse the polarity. What I mean is this. You start with this premise. Your state is powerless. It can do nothing except. And now we can have a conversation about what the exceptions are. Because there are a couple of things you want the state to do. Okay? You want them to keep the peace, to resolve disputes, and protect the country. And for my money, that is about it. But if you had that design in a constitution, along with a whole bunch of other things that would make application of that structure a likelihood. But if you had started with that architecture, then you would have a completely different premise. The premise right now is that governments have the mandate to provide for the general welfare, the common good, the public interest. As long as they have that, they can essentially do anything they want. They cannot have the mandate to look out for the general welfare. If you make them powerless instead and then list the specific exceptions, then you got a shot.
I agree with what Bruce says, but I would approach it from a different perspective. Actually, the Old Testament has a prescription for a proper state, and the one constitution that followed it to a large degree is the United States, and it's based upon, to sum it up, distill it down, this principle of a limited government that Bruce is talking about. And I'll give you an example of how this is supposed to work. There's a French guy named Alexis de Tocqueville, who was from France, where there was, in that period, there was under French monarchy. He visited the United States in the early part of the 19th century, and he was amazed at the absence of government. So when he went to a town and he saw a fire department, it was a volunteer fire department. There was no child welfare or daycares because the community was looking after those things. There was no state-run hospital. It was a community hospital. And, community organizations like churches and community leagues and things like that were doing all the things themselves that we now rely on government to do. And we have to understand the synthesis that Bruce is talking about. Every little bit of control we give up to the government, we don't get back, and that's the loss of our control. So there's a tension there between freedom and responsibility. And I think what I would say is a model of government that has a limited government, as Bruce describes. That's one way to certainly to accomplish it. I also think that we have to have a set of shared values, not necessarily enforce them, but some understanding of what our values are as a society. And, that might be enunciated in a Bill of Rights, for example. But I mean, without that, we're going to have a serious problem in terms of making laws. Aquinas famously said that what law is, it's an ordinance of reason for the common good that is communicated to people so we know what it is. I think that's a pretty good definition of what the law ought to be. But as Bruce often says, and he's right, what we expect the law to be, what we think it is not what it is right now in Canada. And so we need to construct a state that makes laws that make sense, that accord with common sense. Because what we're living through, arguably, is the death of common sense. And we need to restore that to our government.
So, Leighton got me thinking about how, so here where, there was child welfare, there were hospitals, stuff like that, self-organized. That was a different culture, and we've kind of abrogated our responsibility to the state, our responsibility to love each other and take care of each other. I'm amazed at there's a section of the Bible on judgment. Most people like fire and brimstone. Oh, you did this, you did that. But actually, it's about what you didn't do. So the section of the Bible where, it says at the end, everyone's going to be standing in front of Christ the judge, and we're going to be separated into sheep and goats, and he's going to judge us. Now listen on how we're judged not on anything we did. So not you committed, murder and you stole and, you lied. It's what we didn't do to love each other. And the point I'm trying to make here when I share this story is that second commandment, we have a responsibility to love each other. And when we abrogate that to the state or the state takes it, we lose that culture and that sense of responsibility towards each other. And then we have a different society, a much colder society. So, so on this judgment model about what we didn't do to love people, it's like Christ turns to the goats and he says, when I was sick, you didn't care for me. When I was a stranger, you didn't take me in. When I was naked, you didn't clothe me. When I was in prison, you didn't visit me. When I was hungry, you didn't feed me. And the goats say, well, like, Lord, you weren't here. When did we not do this to you? And he says, well, when you didn't do it to the least of these. And then, to say positively to the sheep, he says, when I was sick, you took care of me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was, a prisoner, you visited me. So the point that he was making there was that we need to be judged on what we don't do, not on what we do. And our second biggest responsibility is to care for each other. And in the society we're in now, that responsibility has been taken away. So we no longer have awareness. We no longer actually even look around us to see if we should be taking responsibility in a loving way, like helping somebody out, right? So what I like about what Bruce and Leighton has said is do you understand it would lead to a different type of culture? But, the question, so I agree absolutely with what both of them said. There's some things that are totally unresolved. So, I look at how we've structured ourselves, and one of the big control mechanisms is debt. And, we do need to have property ownership. But does that mean somebody like Elon Musk can have more than some countries and the power that yields? So, I'm kind of like Leighton as I kind of look at the Old Testament. They had a debt jubilee every 7 years. And property would revert back to like a lower level that had been parceled out before. I don't know what those answers are. I know I had bounced this off Bruce about 4 months ago, and he said, what about this, what about this, what about this? And I don't have answers. But I know that when we get to that point, because we're going to get to the point where we have the opportunity to restructure in a different way, that the answers will be there.
There is a danger, though, and that's this. One thing we're trying to get away from is the idea of planning, central planning, expertise planning, like, oh, what do we want to see? And how do we design it? How do we manipulate things so we get there? And there's a great inclination when you're thinking about a new constitution to do the same thing. Like, what kind of society do we want to achieve? What's the goal? And then how do we design the Constitution so that we make sure we get to the goal? Okay? We're just repeating the same thing again. Don't do that. Don't plan. Don't design with the intent of getting to your objective. Now you're social engineering, just like they are. Instead, identify what your principles and premises are. Are you free people? And if you are, what does that mean? Define it. And then once you've defined it, that's the rule in the Constitution. That's the principle. And then once you've got that, then let the thing run. And the culture that you get is the culture that you get when everybody is free. Don't worry right now what that is, because who knows? Your job is not to design the outcome. The job is to understand and identify what the premises of your civilization are.
Amen to that. And think of this. You probably heard about something called the Alberta Transitional Council. Now, these are people who say to the grassroots people who built the referendum and got things this far, okay, kids, it's time for the adults to take over. So their answer is they're going to impanel a group of experts whom they have chosen, who are going to do exactly what Bruce is just saying. They're going to design everything. So when you see, that Alberta Transitional Council, that's what you're looking at. And that's the biggest danger, in my opinion, to Alberta independence. That's what will destroy it. If it loses its grassroots essence, which I think is aimed at reducing the power of government, that's the secret sauce in Alberta independence. If we lose that, then we've lost everything, in my opinion.
I would just suggest that in addition to watching Gandhi this weekend, everyone should pick up a book called Animal Farm and maybe give that a quick read. And that may flow quite nicely from what Leighton just spoke of. So are there any other comments? Final comments, Leighton?
No, I just want to... Oh, there's a gentleman who has his hand up there. Yeah.
So the question is regarding data centers, and that's a whole other rabbit hole.
There is a huge one going up in the Grand Prairie region. A lot of people there are up in arms about it. They're concerned about it because it has a lot of different impacts, especially environmentally. These things take enormous amounts of power, I understand, use a lot of fresh water. But, I'm not someone who fears technology. I look at technology, a lot of, technology is perspective. You take AI, a lot of people are afraid of it, but that's a programmable technology. And I look at something like AI and I think, wow, what could we do with that if we actually programmed AI in a way where it was beneficial to society? We have the ability to do these things, and all aspects of technology have that ability. So it's a matter of perspective. We can be afraid of technology. That's not going to stop it from coming. And these AI data centers, I think you're quite right, though, sir. I think we, as 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 members of the public, as voters, I think we have to demand more detailed information about what these things are going to mean for communities. Alberta, I know, is a place that's coveted for these data centers because they require a lot of land, a lot of resources, and we have kind of an abundance of that in Alberta, in case you haven't noticed.
Final thoughts, Bruce?
Just to thank everyone for coming. It was very great to see you all here. I'd like to thank Teresa and Shawn for putting this together and for inviting me to participate. Amen. It was really, really great to be here. And thanks to our tech guys for holding it all together. Amen.
So we're going to have final thoughts from Shawn.
Right, and then Teresa gets to close. So I really enjoyed that comment about, what do we do? Because there was passion. And I really enjoyed you sharing that your husband's an MLA and that people are waking up. I've been lecturing for years. Bruce and Leighton have been lecturing for years. And there's almost some like freedom group exhaustion and stuff like that. And understand that we kind of expect what comes next to be the same as what's already been. And that's not what's happening right now. What's happening is the pendulum stopped. Like it's gonna, they pulled the trigger, they got to try and do all of this, but I'm not expecting that the path is going to continue. I'm expecting that Canada actually, we're going to end up as the freest nation on the world and the envy of the world because of meetings like this and because people like you realize you can't go on anymore. Like, it's so clear you're going to lose your property rights. It's so clear we're going to become, well, once it's clear, you can't just go to your kid's soccer practice. You can't just go and do your chores. Something's got to give. And so I think we're at the beginning of creating that resistance that's necessary to do it. What that looks like, I don't know, because I think the three of us up here, we're just the watchmen to say this is coming. And once you accept that the army's there coming for you, you decide how to solve it. And there'll be different leaders, and there'll be different people, and there'll be different groups. But I'm confident that, as has been said by some people, I'm not confident. I know God's in control. I know that there's a plan. And I know that we're all part of it. And that we're all here in this room because we're part of it. So I'm excited. So those are my final words. Teresa just reminded me that there's something else that we just got involved with that we need prayer for and we need people to be aware of is that's the Allison inquiry. So MP Dean Allison has decided, he made a decision, whether I get kicked out of the party, whether the media roasts me, whatever, I'm going to formally listen to just vaccine-injured persons share their stories. And Teresa and I have gotten involved with helping him with that. It's not a Conservative Party thing, it's not a government thing, but it's happening on Parliament Hill in a committee room, in a formal setting. And what we learned was, and we learned two things, and one of them is very important for this discussion. So that's the second thing. The first thing we learned is that MPs don't feel that they have permission to formally listen to vaccine-injured persons tell their story, because that means they are publicly agreeing that the vaccine caused injuries. And that's changing because of this inquiry. Like MPs have been coming to Dean, how did you get permission to do this? Well, he didn't. He's just doing it. But he didn't get kicked out of the party. He got blessed. It's like, no, this is fine. You do this, and any other Conservative MP is able to draw alongside if they choose. So it's really like a free thing. But they didn't feel that they had permission to talk. And even just the announcement, like Teresa was showing me the stats, it's only been like 3 weeks. Dean Allison, who has a small social media profile, has had 34 million impressions on this topic. And people are reporting back to him, and other MPs are reporting that people are calling them saying, I'm injured. Could it be from the vaccine? See, so there's a whole subset of Canadians like we live in a bubble. You assume everyone knows what you know. There's a whole group, large group of Canadians that even the idea that their injury, because they know they're injured or people around them are injured, even the idea that their injury could be caused by a vaccine is new. So this is breakthrough. The other thing that we learned is that MPs actually don't know any of this themselves. Like, I can go to a Freedom Group meeting and talk, PCR tests, reporting cases, with COVID as died of COVID. Like, we could just go through this list of 100 things. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. MPs don't know any of it. Like, maybe 3 MPs in Parliament know this stuff. So the fact that they don't is a real eye-opener to me of how much of a bubble we're in. But again, this is that bubble's bursting, and we're going to be able to have that conversation. And it's part of, this awakening that's being put on us. The land rights is part of it. The censorship's part of it. The COVID experience is part of it. And we're all in this together, but we have to understand different people have different knowledge, and they have knowledge you don't have. So we all have to understand we've been in a bubble, and we need to get out of our bubble, start looking at it from a different perspective, and just start working together. Because, like it or not, there's 40 million of us. We're all in the same boat. We're all in this together. We have the same institutions. We have the same need to change how things are going forward, but we live in different bubbles. So I think it's really freeing for me to understand I'm in a bubble, and there are people that aren't in my bubble, and that's going to help me move forward and have a different perspective.
Can I just quickly comment on this? I just did a deep dive for my show into the gang rape inquiry report in Great Britain. You've heard about this? So this is an analogous situation to what's happening with the Allison inquiry, in that 20,000 people in Britain dipped into their own wallets to fund this inquiry. The government refused to do it. And when you read the report, you understand why. Because it was corruption at every single level, a complete institutional failure of young white girls in Great Britain. Well, if you look at what's happening over there right now, since that report came out, Mr. Starmer resigned, and it doesn't look like the government's going to survive. So it just goes to show the Allison inquiry could have a similar impact for Canada.
So we also need to thank Bonnie Tessier, who's been the main organizer of putting this together and has been working tirelessly, and there's other volunteers with her, like right down to the sandwiches and getting the venue. So Bonnie, we just want to thank you, and because it's just, I know the 3 of us feel honored to be in Onoway, 4 of us, sorry, thank you, to be in Onoway and just have the opportunity to do this.
Like being Ringo and the Beatles.
Yeah.
So thank you, Bonnie, and your crew for putting this together. I know there are others, but Bonnie just felt a super need to get this issue out in this area, and Bonnie, we thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you.
And finally, I just want to give a little story, because I'm good at little stories, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. When I was volunteering with Shawn with the National Citizens Inquiry, we found ourselves very much like what the gentleman said. What do we do? How do we get this information out? People would come up to us after we left and while we were actually volunteering, and they said, well, this is great. You've got all of this testimony, but what good has it done? And I see heads nodding, and that's okay. I mean, I know what happened. Everyone here on this panel were involved. We know what we experienced. We also understand that God's not done with it yet. But there was some truth there. How do you get this word out? Like everyone in this room here has spent a Saturday with us in Onoway. And you may be asking yourself, yeah, now what? What do I do with this? Where do I go? What's this supposed to look like? When we resigned from the National Citizens Inquiry, Shawn had decided to do a cross-country tour with the Natural Health Product Protection Association, and he had asked me to help him with the communications. And I was really struggling with whether or not I could do it again. Like, why bother? I'd given 3 years and it didn't quite crack, right? We were close, we had victories, we all know what we experienced there, but it didn't get through. And I was really ruminating about it. And one night, in the middle of the night, I was woken up by a really good friend of mine upstairs. And he said, "Stop fussing. It's not that complicated." You see, I like to complicate everything. Similar to what, I'm not sure who it was who said, you know, we've been taught that we need to have some sort of plan or instruction manual in order to work forward, move forward. All he said to me was, "It's very simple, Teresa. All you have to do is tell people to tell people." It's no longer sufficient to just share this information, take these little clips, take the paper, read it, share it with your safe people, and then throw it in the recycle bin. Those days are done. They're done. Too many Canadians that don't have the information that you may have in your minds are suffering. And they don't know how to get it. But you see, what he said to me, it was the instruction that really mattered. It was not just tell people, it was instruct them to tell someone else. It's exponential math. We go 3 deep, and guess what? We're there. In 24 hours, outside of the echo chamber, Dean Allison had over 1 million views on what would have been a topic there's no way I could have ever dreamed that we could have this conversation. So that's telling people to tell people. And these are the instructions that I give you today that were given to me in the fall. And if we hadn't have gone to the Health Charter Tour, dragging a Volkswagen van across Canada on a trailer, I can't tell you how, like,
on a trailer.
Like, it was tough. We would not have met Dean Allison. We would have not sat in his office and have him ask us, "You know what? I just don't understand why I can't listen to Canadians." You see, he has a plan. And it's tell people to tell people. And the last point that he wanted me to share with everyone whenever I have a mic is you have now all been put on notice. You're all on notice. We're now all watchmen. So on behalf of the NHPPA, Your Land Series, Mr. Leighton Grey, Mr. Bruce Pardy, Mr. Shawn Buckley, and myself, Teresa, I'd like to thank you for attending. Now go tell people to tell people.